comes along the way. Please give an elite business welcome to the founder of Green and Blacks, Jo Fairley.
Thanks, Ollie. Obviously, I travel everywhere with chocolate, but just to say that this is the incentive for the best question in my Q&A session at the end. So just to focus your minds, I'm just going to pop it here. But yes, my name is Jo Fairley, and I am a chocaholic. And I'm co-founder with my husband, Craig Sams, of Green and Blacks. Didn't do it all on my own. And we dared to launch a challenger chocolate brand. And I'm here this afternoon to share the story, the roller coaster story of how we built that into an ethical global brand and an entrepreneurial journey that I'm sure will resonate with a lot of you. Because at the end of the day, you know, business is business. The challenges that we face are the challenges that we all face, whether you are making widgets or chocolate, or whether you have a legal practice or a tech company, we're all in the same boat together. And of course, at the moment, we are all facing pretty unprecedented challenges. But first of all, if I just give you a little background, I came to chocolate as a chocolate lover, but with a deep green streak in me. Ever since at the age of about 15, a friend gave me a copy of a book called A Shopper's Guide to Saving the Planet. And it really touched me, actually. But the only bit of direct action I could take was to get my mum to drive a lot of Gordon's gin bottles to the bottle bank. And I took a bit of direct action in the form of putting some bricks in the loo cisterns at school, and unfortunately got busted standing on a lavatory seat and sent to see the headmistress. So my green living slightly went into dormancy at that point. But the whole green agenda bubbled up again, and I was perfectly poised to kind of follow my passion for the environment. And I found myself writing a column for the Times called Ecosphere, and also presenting a 30-week series for Sky called Go for Green. And in 1991, I also married an incredibly green man. Craig Sams is founder of a company called Whole Earth Foods. I don't know if anyone here has ever eaten Whole Earth's peanut butter, but basically that's obviously why I married him. And he was also chairman of the Soil Association at the time. And I walked into his office one day and I found 2 squares from a sample bar of chocolate sitting on his desk. And, you know, you find chocolate on your husband's desk, there really is only one thing to do. So I put it in my mouth, and this taste explosion went off. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best, most delicious, naughtiest, darkest chocolate I've ever eaten. What is it? And he said, well, it is a sample of the world's first organic chocolate, but I can't do anything with it because it has sugar in. And Whole Earth was founded on the principles of no added sugar. But I guess the chocolate nagged at me, and I nagged at Craig, and eventually he turned around to me and said, look, if you're so interested, you do it. And what he really meant by that was that he could take care of some of the operations, the distribution, etc., but I had to do the PR and marketing, which obviously as a journalist I had some insights, albeit on the other side of the territory. And the really big catch was that I had to finance it, because we were in the middle of a financial year. He didn't have launching a whole new brand in the middle of his budget. And, you know, you have some defining moments in life. I'm sure everyone in this audience has had one. But I was a journalist. I was used to writing about other people doing exciting stuff. I had never, ever imagined that one day I would have a business of my own. So actually, I remembered a postcard that I had bought in Carnaby Street as a teenager. And I'd had it for years and years and years. And it was a man on a diving board. And it said, if you don't do it, you'll never know what would have happened if you had done it. So I went to the edge of the diving board and I dived off, and then began the most incredible adventure. And my personal inspiration, and I think we all need role models and inspirations, but it was Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop. And I'd gotten to know Anita through my journalism. And we'd been to Romania together, we'd been to Mexico, and we'd become friends. And I was incredibly admiring of the way that Anita had shown that you could actually do good through doing business. So I had this idea, and it's a cliche now, but that maybe I could change the world one square of chocolate at a time. But of course, first, I had to find the money. And I suppose one of the great strokes of good fortune was that I'd actually just sold my flat before I moved in with Craig, and I had banked some equity. And so I had a nest egg that was £20,034, I think. And our first 2 tons of chocolate were going to cost me 20 grand, which I have to say, even in 1991, didn't leave me enough for a pair of shoes. But I had to ring my bank manager to get him to transfer the money so that I could send it to France for the 2 tons of chocolate. And weirdly, even though it's your money, they want to know what you're spending it on. So I was able to say, chocolate. So 20 grand's worth of chocolate. And then we had to create a brand. And this global brand that you see here actually began in this very borough in Kensington, in the Portobello Road in our bedroom, with a yellow legal pad and a biro on a rainy Saturday night. And I think I can safely say that I would not have been invited to Business Elite Live if we'd gone with any of Craig's brand suggestions. They were things like eco-choc and bio-choc and organic-choc. And they were kind of stuck in that natural foods niche. And I said to him, I've got this idea that why don't we have something that sounds like an established British confectionery company? So you've got brands like Callard and Bowser and Barker and Dobson, and you have Charbonnel and Walker, and you have Fortnum and Mason. And what they all have in common is an ampersand. And so basically, we were green because we were organic, and we were black because we had the darkest chocolate on the market at the time. And I whacked an ampersand between those 2 words. And honestly, the minute I said it, I just knew we had it. It said quality, it said heritage, and it sounded like it had been around since about 1876. And I have to say that took 10 minutes. And we scampered downstairs and we sketched out the design for this in about another 10. So it does really, really blow me away on a daily basis that we now have a brand that is worth approaching £100 million a year, is officially cooler than Prada. For the last, I think, 11 years, we have been voted the coolest food brand in Britain on the CoolBrand survey, which means a lot because it's judged not just by some of the hippest people in the design and retail world, but also by 2,500 real customers. But how the hell did we get here from what were very, very humble beginnings? And I think that there are several factors in our success, and that's one of the things I'm going to share with you, because I think that they are crucial for any business of any size. So from my perspective, it starts with product. PR was very important to us. Sampling was very important to us. Customer service was incredibly powerful. And then we have the added extra with Green and Blacks, which is those ethics which underpin our brand and are something that we hear more and more about today. Because customers, more than ever, are looking for brands that have ethical and sustainable credentials. But if we start with product, with chocolate, that's always going to be the sexiest bit. But honestly, when I put that 2 squares of chocolate in my mouth, it really was the best chocolate I'd ever tasted. And I think that having that conviction in your company, in your product, or in your service is absolutely crucial, because if you do believe it's the best it can possibly be, then it just makes it so much easier to sell it, whether that is, in our case, to a supermarket buyer or an end customer or whatever, and then ultimately to the kind of talented people that you want to bring on board to advance your business. But I think the real kind of advantage that I brought to Green and Blacks was my years of experience as a journalist. I understood what to push journalist buttons. So the very first thing that I did was to craft a press release, having been on the receiving end of thousands of them, which I hoped was going to catch people's eye. And it said, as a headline, it said, "Guilt-free chocolate, ? Well, almost." And I sent it to anybody I could think of. So newspaper editors, magazine editors, beauty editors, chefs, restaurateurs, etc. And we got our first coverage in just a few weeks later, right on, and it tastes good too, at which point I think I did a small cartwheel around the office. But to be honest, I think the reason we got it noticed on people's desks was not because I'd crafted a fabulous title, but because I accompanied every single press release with copious quantities of dark chocolate, which is a very good way to get your product noticed on somebody's desk, and actually became one of the founding pillars of what we did, because we realized that every square really does speak 1,000 words. And as a result of getting the chocolate out there, an amazing kind of coterie of chefs, whether it was Delia Smith or Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall or ultimately Jamie Oliver, really became champions of the chocolate. And it wasn't very long before every single Sunday supplement that you picked up or every single glossy magazine specified 70% dark chocolate as the benchmark of quality, even though actually, at that point, ours was the only 70% dark chocolate on the market. So, because of all of this, I mean, I'm still, even in the age of social media, I'm still a great advocate of print coverage. I think it lodges in people's brains in a way that social media doesn't. And we grew very fast, faster than we expected. But the real awareness breakthrough for us came when we launched this product, Maya Gold. And Maya Gold was the very first product in the UK to carry the fair trade mark, which is something now that we are incredibly familiar with. Every coffee shop, every tea shop, etc. And being first with that mark, when you can be first with anything, you can ride a great wave of publicity. And it gave us some help with marketing of the type that I would love to be able to tell you that you could write into a marketing plan. But unfortunately, in this case, you couldn't really even make it up. And it came about for a reason we'd never ever given a thought to, which is the really close links between the church and the developing world. So basically, the church became my sales force. Completely unexpected. And the first I knew was that somebody rang me up one Friday afternoon and said, "Do you know there's a run for fair trade going on through the streets of Britain? 20,000 young Methodists have been taking part. Some of them are running with a bar of your chocolate in one hand and a flaming torch in the other. And they get to their nearest supermarket and they lobby that person to stock your chocolate." I mean, I just thought it was a practical joke. I rang up the Methodist HQ PR department and I discovered that actually this had been happening. The next thing was that vicars up and down the country took it upon themselves to ring the Tesco buyer, always my trickiest buyer, who had given an interview to say to some magazine or newspaper saying he wasn't particularly taken with this concept of fair trade, didn't think it was going to work, and wasn't going to stock the product in Tesco's. So basically, the Vicars of Britain decided that they would call the Tesco buyer and try to persuade him. And the first I heard of this was he rang me up and he said, "What is this chocolate that all these vicars keep ringing me about?" And that literally is how we got our Tesco listing. So that, you know, the crowning glory was getting home on the day of a very nail-biting launch. We got this product from concept to double certified fair trade and organic on the shelf in Sainsbury's in 7 weeks. We launched it at the BBC Good Food Show, having flown it from France to Heathrow, etc. And we got home, switched on the telly, and there was that chocolate bar flashed up behind Michael Burke's head on the 9 o'clock news, and it had been an actual news item for a total of about 10 minutes that day. And you know, one of the things that we did, and I think that we were an early brand for doing this, is that we shared our story. Sharing the story of our producers in particular has been really important to building brand loyalty. And what I will say is that people love stories, you know, more than ever. They love storytelling. They love to hear about brands. They love to hear about products. They love to hear about places and sourcing and so on. So long as they are authentic stories. You can't just make these things up because people have a very strong built-in bullshit detector. But for me, you know, one day I was doing a chocolate tasting, of which I did many, and I realized that on the inside of a chocolate bar wrapper, I had a sort of 16 square inches of paper on which to tell the story of our producers and the difference that buying that bar of chocolate made to those producers. And, you know, it really does. We've now been doing this we've now had a fair trade product for 25 years, and we've been able to see with our own eyes the unbelievable impact that it's had on the cocoa growing families. When we started trading with the Maya, there was no secondary education for the children in those villages, and now over 90% of them go on to secondary school, and they bring the skills from university and business school back to those villages to help them travel much further along the path out of poverty. So, you know, that is what customers now are looking for. They're looking for stories like that, where they know that the money that they've spent has made some kind of difference. But there was another really important factor which helped us to make that jump from what could very easily have been an eco-niche into the mainstream, and that was design. You know, chocolate may taste delicious, but it also looks fantastic, and that is more crucial today than it ever has been before. We live in an ever more design-conscious world. Sometimes I meet brand owners or business startups who tell me, I haven't got a design budget, and I just say to them, find it from somewhere. Because actually, almost by the week, it just needs to go higher and higher on the priority list, because that is your real estate. That is how you attract people to your product in a world where there's so much noise. And I think for me, having had a career in magazines, that bit came very naturally. You know, as a magazine editor, you're always trying to magically create a magazine cover that leaps off the newsstand and into women's handbags without them even realizing they bought it. So I understood how important looks are in a product. But, you know, a few slides ago, you saw my first bar. It wasn't that great. We'd done it in 10 minutes. But I didn't think I had any money to spend on design. However, I fielded a call one afternoon from a design agency around the corner in Notting Hill called Pearl Fisher. And a woman called Karen Wellman said to me, we love your chocolate. We eat a lot of it in the office, but we can't wait to get our hands on your packaging. So I figured I got nothing to lose by going to chat with them. They talked me through an absolutely fantastic presentation. They'd done some great work for Absolute Vodka and Waitrose. I think it was about 2 years ago I found out that was the only work they'd done, but it was very impressive. And at the end of it, I was almost heartbroken to turn around and say to them, I don't have a design budget. So another stroke of good fortune is that they turned to me and said, look, we do eat so much of this in the office that if you provide us with some cases for free to kind of inspire the design process, then we will come up with some designs for free, and if you like them, we can talk. So Craig and I went back about 2 weeks later, and they showed us 10 amazing designs. We could have gone, I think, with any single one of them. But the one that we did decide to go with was an evolution from that original packaging with its ribbon and its seal and its gold and its brown wrapper, etc. Because actually, if you stray too far from what people know, then they'll just walk past it in the store. But I love the way that this slide illustrates our kind of packaging journey, including the moment, it was our kind of moment, actually, when we suddenly realized that if we put the chocolate bar upright instead of sideways, we could potentially get twice as many listings on a supermarket shelf. So that was really important. But I still love how the brand looks, and I think it has been absolutely central to our success and is the reason why we became that first brand to leap out of that natural food kind of milieu into the luxury market. But you know, when it comes to launching new products or new lines or subsequently new businesses, I've never tried to identify a gap in the market. I've never used a focus group in my life. I still believe that the best way to identify a business need is actually just to put yourself in the customer's shoes. Because, you know, when you do that, you are able to tap into your own instincts and your own insights, and rather than kind of use an expensive focus group to identify this gap in the market. And every single business I've ever started, every product I've launched, has been literally born from me going, I can't find this. And I just have a hunch that if I can't find it and I would like to be able to buy it or use it or whatever, then the chances are that lots of other people feel the same thing, feel the same way. So now we can afford lots of advertising for Green and Blacks to bring in new customers. But what I would say is that for the first 9 years of the brand, we never spent one single penny on advertising. We didn't have a big budget, and we felt that there were much better ways to use that budget than paid for advertising. So basically, in terms of promotion, what we did was we spent everything on getting chocolate into people's mouths. We were absolutely convinced that as it melted on their taste buds, other people would have the same kind of epiphany that I had. And, you know, tasting is believing became our philosophy. And I think over the years we've given away hundreds of tons of chocolate. And sampling is still central to our brand building strategy, to the point where a couple of years ago we bought this very sexy van. And it did the rounds of cities around the UK, sampling out of the side of the van, doing collaborations with local restaurants, etc. And I always say to people, if you've got a great product, give it away. You know, there is huge power in generosity. And if you've got the sort of business where you can't just give it away, so if you are an accounting firm, if you're a legal firm, if you are any kind of consultant, you can't just give your stuff away, can't give it away. So for me, testimonials are like free chocolate. And it is absolutely worth every moment of somebody's time gathering those nuggets of nice things that people say about the service that you offer, about the business that you have, collating them, breaking them down into a little soundbite that you can use on your website, on your marketing, on your social media, however you communicate with your potential customers, because that is what gives people a flavor of what you do. But ultimately, you know, I think it's it's that combination of a great product twinned with design flair and then underpinned by strong values, which is the real secret of how come we've managed to stay on that CoolBrand's list, despite the fact that, you know, you can walk into a garage forecourt now and buy a bar of Green and Blacks. At the same time, I can be traveling somewhere, staying in a nice hip hotel, which I like to do, and sometimes I will open the mini bar and find a bar of Green and Blacks in there, at which point I don't think I've ever failed to burst into tears, because somebody said to me, "What's it like when that happens?" And I said, "It's exactly like finding your child in the fridge." So, you know, one of the most important lessons, though, that I learned, I mean, we had so many opportunities come our way, but I have really learned the importance of being strategic. When you're growing a business, resources are limited. And I think the biggest mistake that we made, particularly, was not being strategic about exports. We were flattered into selling to pretty much anyone who came up to us at a trade show. We did lots of trade shows around the world, and you know, we would. You came from Australia or you came from Mongolia, and if we didn't have representation in your country, you could pretty much, once we'd done a little bit of research, get the dealership for Green and Blacks. And then the very first thing that happened some years later, when we took in private equity investment, was that the export department just took a huge red pen to almost all the export book, because they very rapidly twigged that actually it was just as much work to send half a pallet to Estonia as it was to send 2 containers to Australia or New Zealand or America or whatever. And actually, we would have been much, much better off thinking strategically about which markets were most likely to be receptive to our product and to our messaging. So, you know, countries where they had similar chocolate eating habits maybe, and they could be converted to this idea of having higher quality, you know, more ethically sourced chocolate. So that actually boiled down to North America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Northern Europe. And they, you know, quite rightly realized that servicing all those little countries with their teeny tiny orders was, every single country had its own tariffs, it had its own import barriers, it had labeling requirements, health and safety requirements, etc. And that was a huge amount of time wasted on our part. But what I will say, I think, is that the importance of prioritizing and being strategic, it's not just relevant to exports. And I think that when you have a startup or an SME or a growing business, lots and lots of opportunities present themselves. But you are very soon going to run out of resources and money if you try to follow up on every single one of them. And I think that I've come to the conclusion it doesn't really even matter which 2 or 3 or maybe 4 opportunities you follow up on, because you're going to resource them properly, both with money and human resources. You're going to do things really well. And if you try and do everything, you're just going to spread yourself so thin. I was talking to a perfume brand recently who was telling me he had 32 collaborations on the go. And, you know, I just wanted to get out my red pen and narrow it down to 2 or 3 so that he could really follow through on them properly. Now, you know, here we are. We have not as many people here as would have been here in normal circumstances. Hello, everybody at the office. There is no question that these are very, very uncertain times. Heaven knows what the impact of coronavirus and the, you know, infodemic swirling around it is going to be in the long term. Underlying it all is all the uncertainty about Brexit. But what I do know is that whenever there is uncertainty, there is also great opportunity. Because when I look around, I see a lot of companies who are just like rabbits in headlights at the moment. You know, they don't know what to do, they're running around like headless chickens. But the bottom line is that the world and the future are always going to be uncertain. You know, if it's not coronavirus, if it's not Brexit, it's going to be something else. And business absolutely must not put its finger on the pause button just because of uncertainty, sort of waiting for everything to become clear, because that mustn't stop you from developing new products and developing new relationships and developing new ways of doing things, because there is always going to be change, there is always going to be uncertainty. But the smart organizations are the ones which remain agile and actually adapt to these changing conditions and, you know, come up with bright ideas while at the same time staying true to the basic fundamental vision of their business. And we had to cope with a huge amount of change and uncertainty. And, you know, whether it was hurricanes, whether it was blockades on the ports in Togo, we had our own patisserie Valerie moment at one time. We also, very importantly, I think, had to find a way of dealing with the stress that comes with that. And what I say to people in business is that I think that we are all on a bound to find a kind of blueprint for dealing with stress, for dealing with uncertainty, for physical and mental wellness that keeps us right at the top of our game, because that allows us to be the calm at the center of the storm that is swirling around us. And we owe that to the people that are on our team. But we had lots and lots of financial ups and downs. We had more probably than our fair share of sleepless nights because we were growing so fast. And as I said, you know, the Green and Blacks probably sounds like a fairy story, but we had lots and lots of moments of absolute gothic horror. And leaving that aside, it's actually incredibly difficult to grow a business as fast as we did. You know, we were looking at 100% a year minimum growth, which sounds fantastic on paper, and all your friends are going to be envious, but it is going to give you the most almighty cash flow challenges. And there's no question that cash flow is the thing that kept us awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there came a point at the end of the 90s when we knew that to get to the next stage, we had to take investment. And this was done in a couple of stages. We were actually courted by a few investors, which was nice because it bumped the price up. But the guys that we decided to go with felt like a really comfortable fit. They had previously taken a company I'm sure some of you know called the New Covent Garden Soup Company. And they'd taken that from 2 million a year to 22 million and sold it for 28. And I felt that there were real parallels with Green and Blacks, because it was a brand that was quite widely available, but somehow people were still very loyal to it, and they felt like it was their secret discovery. So we took a package of shares and cash, which helped the sleepless night, and we knew that at some stage it was going to be sold on. But I think the most important thing for us at that point was the fact that that cash, those shares, came with an injection of money to spend on really high-level talent, because we had got to the point where we couldn't invest in, we couldn't advertise, we couldn't promote, we could barely product development, everything was tied up in stock, and we certainly couldn't afford the kind of talent that we knew we needed. So they brought in a new financial director, a new MD, and a new marketing director who came from Burger King, which was a bit distressing to a couple of vegetarians like Craig and me, but he turned out to be absolutely the most fantastic person to power the brand to the next level. And after 9 years of relying on sampling and PR, we finally had an advertising budget to consolidate that brand awareness. So we knew, as I say, that it was going to be sold on, and we had given up control. In fact, you very rarely get to keep the control and have the money. So in 2005, the company was acquired by Cadbury's, which felt like a really good fit because, again, Cadbury's sort of like to think that they invented corporate social responsibility, and they kind of did. But as I say, the lesson I have learned is that nothing stays the same for very long. Nobody realized that Kraft was going to come circling like sharks and was going to gobble up Cadbury's whole. But I think that what we're proudest of is the fact that we've actually managed to influence Kraft, or Mondelez as our division has become, and show them, as Anita said, that doing good is good for business. And we know we did that with Cadbury's. There was a dinner when Cadbury's was acquired. There was a dinner for the outgoing CEO from Cadbury's, a guy called Todd Stitzer. It was a bizarre night, which turned into kind of Cadbury's funeral, all these men in black tie crying into their soup. But Todd turned to Craig and I at one point, and he said, "I want to thank Joe Fairley and Craig Sams for showing Cadbury's the way with fair trade," which was his acknowledgement that seeing that doing good was good for business had encouraged them to put the fair trade mark on dairy milk, which has had an impact on farmers around the world that, in a way that we could never even dream of. And that has inspired, in turn, a huge project in West Africa for Mondelez, which is a $400 million investment program which not only trains farmers but works on the ground with 13 different charities to work in villages and establish what would be transformative for those villages, whether it is a school, whether it is a water infrastructure project, because in Ghana particularly, women and children have to walk for miles and miles a day to fetch water. And the thing that I think I like the best, not least because it's International Women's Week, is the fact that from a patriarchy, you've now got a situation where you can't be part of cocoa life unless women have a say in financial affairs. And I think that, that was, if you ask me what I'm proudest of, it's the impact that we've had on the rest of the cocoa industry. We're just being incredibly proud of the fact that we've got people to think about, we've built awareness that the shopping decisions that people make, whether you're buying food or drink or clothing, really can have a positive impact on the planet and on other people's lives. Although, to be perfectly honest, we didn't know how ahead of the curve we were being. We simply, everything we did, we just followed our own moral compass. But interestingly, the world is catching up, and it's got to. But I was talking recently to the head of one of the biggest management consultancies in the country, and he said to me that when he is interviewing millennials now, they are the ones that are asking him the difficult questions, because they are looking for organizations to work with whose values reflect their own values. People from all walks of life now they want meaning in their life, they want meaning in their work. They want to work for somebody where the organization has strong ethical or environmental or social values. And so it now is a factor in helping to attract and retain talent and boost engagement. And I think that that's something that needs to be on the radar of every single business in this room. I'm sure you've figured out by now, though, that I am completely self-taught. I did leave school at 16 with 6 O-levels, and that's it. So I have had to learn as I've gone along. And I've done that through reading, basically. Now I listen to podcasts as well. But I've read an enormous number of business books and magazines. And I just try to take away one single lesson from each of them that kind of will stick. And I'm going to share with you I think, the best lesson that I ever learned. And it came from a book by Martha Stewart. And Martha, I think she was the world's first female self-made billionaire, actually. She has a homewares empire, she has a media empire, and you just have to kind of park the fact that Martha went to jail for insider trading. She did write a very good business book called The Martha Rules. Refers to her prison sentence in her first chapter. But she basically taught me that in business we need two particular tools. We need a microscope, because we have to get the detail of our business right. And no entrepreneur I know is not detail focused. But we also need a telescope, because we need to be able to stand back and look from afar at what we're doing and how we might do things differently. Look down that telescope. And, you know, for me, this is what events like this offer. I'm sure everybody in this room has 6,387 unanswered emails. You've got a stack of reports to read and maybe a report to write. But I never regretted the time that I took out of the office, away from the firefighting, to come to something like this, because it just gave me such a valuable and brief opportunity to look down that telescope and look at things from afar and figure out the changes that need to be made. So I really, really encourage everyone in the room and in their offices watching this to take that brief, precious opportunity to look down the telescope before the firefighting takes over again. And I think the other great thing about events like this is that, I don't know about you, but most of the time in business, I feel like a little lone salmon swimming upstream, you know, and you come to an event like this and you realize that actually it's a shoal. Everyone is going through the same thing. We're all trying to move in the same direction and facing the same challenges. So, you know, well done for being here, and don't feel isolated and like that little lone salmon, because, as I say, business is business and challenges are challenges, and we are all going through the same things. So any minute now, we are going to enter my favorite bit, which is the Q&A. Please put me on the spot. But thank you, meanwhile, for giving me the chance to be here today to share a little bit of our business journey. I'm sure you can tell it's been an unbelievable adventure. Just to go from a little bedroom up the road to a brand that is worth £100 million a year, is officially cooler than Prada, has helped to change the lives of thousands of farmers and their families in the developing world. And I think maybe really did help to change the world one square of chocolate at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jo.
Ollie, are you going to moderate the questions?
Well, I am, if that's all right. And by the way, is it a sort of winner-takes-all, or is there going to be an unbundling?
It's a winner-takes-all, and more than that, Ollie, I'm going to get you to judge the best question.
Oh, no pressure.
No pressure
right,
there,
okay.
then.
Well, I think Voltaire said you can judge a person by the questions they ask, so no pressure, everyone.
Who wants to win some
Who's
chocolate?
first? I know we've got some curious guests. Yes, over here, and then next door we'll go red, and then
Let's do those
maroon.
two first.
No, because for the louds, for the
people
live
behind
stream,
you won't be able to hear.
Here we go. And so, by the way, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes. I want to get as many questions in as possible, so let's do it.
Hi, Jo. I'm
Hello.
Rebecca.
Hello.
My question is, what did you find the hardest part in growing your business?
It was that cash flow. I mean, you know, I think it would be wonderful if businesses could grow at a nice, manageable 10% a year or 20% a year. But when you're growing that fast, you know, all your friends are envious and they think, wow, that's so impressive. But actually, you're just going, how the hell do we do this? How do we navigate this? And so it was literally that, just managing the cash flow. And we used invoice discounting, which is not the cheapest way to borrow money, and meant that we could draw down 75% of the value of the invoices as soon as we issued them, because we had nice sort of insurable customers, but it still meant that we had no wiggle room. So yeah, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Anyone else suffer any cash flow challenges in this room? It's pretty universal, I think.
Yeah.
So, like, you didn't like face any like major big like hurdles like on the growth of your business? That's what I was kind of more, looking for as an answer.
Well, yes. I mean, I think they were constant. I always think it's a good day if you get through a day without some kind of major hurdle. I have a business now called the Perfume Society, which we do discovery boxes. We send them out to people all over the country so that they can trial perfumes and hopefully go on to buy big sizes. Well, all pumps for perfume in the world are made in China. So that's the hurdle that I'm facing at the moment. But that's kind of normal.
Okay.
It's just, that's what business is like. And if you're not up to dealing with that, then work for somebody else.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Next door, Jenny, please.
So I was just interested because obviously Green and Blacks, for me, built its brand on being quite unique and different to big consumer brands. Is it hard seeing it now you've sold it and it's still very much a very big, powerful brand?
No, I'm just really, really proud of it. I really am. I mean, it's like watching your child. I suppose it's like watching your child grow up, leave home, and go to university. It will always be our baby. And I think what I'm proudest of is the fact that we've managed to navigate, 14 years on from selling the company, we've managed to navigate those tricky waters where not every owner can be still there 14 years later. And what it really meant was picking our battles. There were some things where we just had to let it go because it was just an emotional decision, a change that, maybe something we wouldn't have done. But where it's really important, we literally throw our toys out of our pram. And at that point, it's always taken seriously because they know that we're not doing it just for the emotional reasons. We're doing it for rational reasons because it's something that will fundamentally affect a pillar of the brand.
Good question. Who's got the next question? We'll go one,
Got
two, three.
two more together,
Thick and fast we go, Fiona.
Hi. You said that you don't come from a background of having an MBA and a background of traditional, growing a business. And what I'm interested in, was there any point in which your instinct brought you into conflict with kind of traditional board members and you went with your instinct on a decision?
Well, to be perfectly honest, my other board member was my husband.
Right, so it was just...
And I think that what that illustrates is that he and I are incredibly different. And what worked so well about the two of us working together is that he does have an MBA. He went to the Wharton Business School in America. He's very rational, he's very strategic, he's very kind of, operations focused, and still very visionary. I was the outward-facing stuff. So I was the kind of product development, branding, design, PR, marketing, sampling, all of that stuff. And what was so great about that is we had this kind of naturally trusting relationship, partnership, which is what you want with your husband. But we had different skill sets. And what worked so well is there was a kind of synergy of that, and it became something where the sum was greater than the parts, basically. So I think that where businesses work really well is where you've got two people with these complementary skills rather than massively overlapping. And what I'd love to see in business is some kind of matchmaker company or network where you got people, because people sometimes come up to me, they've got a great idea, they have absolutely no business now or idea of how to get it off the ground. And conversely, I have accountants come up to me and say, I'd really love to have a business, but I don't have any ideas. And so I think if you could just put the two together, that would be fantastic.
Oh, if I could meet some of your accountants, that would be great.
So, Jo, are you seriously saying that you and your husband never had a big disagreement about Green and Blacks?
Never.
Amazing.
Really never.
How great. Right.
Really never.
Okay. Very good. Well, let's go next door, Christine.
You mentioned about your...
Only if he ate the last square.
Then forget it.
You mentioned about your gothic horror stories. Can you expand on that? Or at
Yes,
least
let's dig one of those up.
The black hole, the Patisserie Valerie moment, and I do thank Luke Johnson very much for giving it a name, basically. But there was a moment I was actually visiting a dying friend in San Francisco, and Craig rang up and said, this black hole has appeared in the finances. And what had happened is we'd had a series of power cuts on the Portobello Road randomly on a Wednesday afternoon. And it was back in the day when, in order to get computer records of things, you had to back them up onto floppy disks. And it hadn't been happening. And so one of these power cuts just blew out the account's computer. And we had to get a forensic accountant in to piece everything back together. And we discovered that through collusion between a very trusted senior person and an external supplier, £400,000 had been siphoned off from the business.
Wow.
And that was it. I mean, that was a huge black hole. We got ourselves out of it by Craig licensed the peanut butter business to his manufacturer who'd been trying to get his hand on it for years. It put 400,000 back in the business. It was enough to get us through it. But what I've since come to discover is that actually fraud is incredibly common. And nobody talks about it because they feel ashamed. They think they did something wrong. And you have to take a decision. You have to decide whether you're going to go after that person or whether, which takes a huge amount of resources, or whether you are actually going to go, you know what, it's more important to look forward and focus on the future than it is to spend a year or 18 months looking back over our shoulders. So that was the gothicest of the horror moments, I have to say.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, we'll come to you in the front row straight after this
Hi,
one here.
hi Joe, thanks for that. That was great. Gordon, I'm slightly biased because I'm a Vistage chair, so I work with lots of business leaders. And the guys I work with are lonely.
Are lonely?
Lonely was one of the key reasons I work with them and help them. I just wondered if you'd felt lonely. You mentioned it a little bit. I just wonder how lonely you were at what stage.
I think, again, that it was the great thing of working with my husband. I mean, that had its own challenges, and I had to definitely set some boundaries about when we were allowed to talk about business, which was basically quarantined to an hour after work. Otherwise, you would sort of be waking up, rolling over at 1 o'clock in the morning and asking some kind of business question. So I pretty soon put a stop to that. But I think because there were two of us, it took the loneliness away. And actually, every business I've had, it hasn't always been with Craig, but it has been with one other person with complementary rather than similar skills to me. Yeah. However, what I will say is that my best friend has a tea company, which is the sort of tea equivalent of Green and Blacks, if you like. And when she is feeling lonely, when she is feeling that it's all getting on top of her, I have to be that sounding board and that, and kind of lift her up when things get tough. And that I gladly do, but I think it is definitely a lonely place to be. Either if you really are just at the top on your own, or if you are a kind of sole trader or a sole entrepreneur, it's very lonely. So you play a very important part in that. But what I have found is that also, just referencing the well-being thing, and the need to take care of ourselves. When people want to give up in a situation like that, it's usually because they're completely knackered, they're running on empty, they're just too exhausted to see a way through. And so I very consciously work to not put myself in that kind of position, because I know that's when I just want to throw in the towel.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I fear this is going to be our last. Why don't we harvest these final three? I'll help us jog along, and I'm going to go 1, 2, and then that back corner, and we'll talk over drinks, forgive me. Please.
Hi, Joe. I'm Ness. My question is about corporate social responsibility. So I'm very passionate about sustainability. So my question is, are you still involved in sustainability within Green Blacks, or you're letting Cadbury handle that?
Okay, very good.
No, I mean, I'm not involved in it, but they've taken what we did and they've built on it in a way that I could never have, never even thought of, to be perfectly honest. And they do they talk to us about what they're doing, and you know, it makes my heart swell with pride. And it's not, you know, what I see everywhere is business used to have this kind of very negative image. And, you know, a little company like Green and Blacks can make a small difference. Big companies can make a huge difference. And what I've discovered is actually big companies are full of people that generally want to get out of bed in the morning and feel good about what they do. And that's what is changing things. And there are very few companies in this world that are kind of part of some kind of evil empire that are run by men with white cats, you know. So I'm very encouraged by the way that big business is shifting. A lot of which, just as a PS, a lot of which they don't talk about because, and there's this whole kind of secret sustainability movement, because the fear with a big company is that they think if they talk about one or two aspects where they're getting things right, then it leaves them vulnerable and people will take a pot shot at what they're getting wrong. And I think that it has to be open, has to be a dialogue, and people have to understand that this is a journey, and nobody's perfect.
So on this, we'll take our final two questions at once, and then we'll pick them off. I wonder if we've had our winning question already. I mean, the pressure is mounting, isn't it?
Hi, Joe. Barry. Thanks for the talk. I think you talked quite a lot about strategic thinking, but also gave lots of examples of things that came up by chance. So my question is, to what extent did you plan your strategy to take advantage of those kind of moments of serendipity, for want of a better phrase?
Good question. And why don't I just harvest this final one from the back, and then Joe, pick away.
I will give you that answer, Barry.
Yeah.
Very impressive, incredible talk. I was very inspired. Thank you so much. After this journey of yours, which was amazing to hear about, how did you know when it was time to sell and let your child go off in the world and be raised by someone else?
I'm going to answer the second one first. I think we had one too many cash flow crises. And there was one day that Craig turned around to me. And, you know, when you're growing at 100% a year, it's fine. You get to 2.5 million, and you know that next year it's going to be 5 million. And that is a very common point in a business trajectory at which companies break, that kind of 2.5 million point. And I remember Craig saying to me, you know what, I would rather have a smaller percentage of something big than 100% of nothing, which is, you know, at times what we were looking at. So that kind of eased the decision making. And yeah, we just knew. And Barry, in terms of you know, I think getting your systems and operations in place so that you are as in control of things on that front as you can be, enables you, if you get the nuts and bolts in place, if you get all those systems, then serendipitous moments will come along and you can decide whether to resource them or not. But, you know, if everyone's running around like a headless chicken in distribution, then you haven't got the energy and you haven't got the capacity to take advantage of those kismet moments. But you know, very often I would just listen to my gut. It was like, this is a really great opportunity. You know, I don't know why this one is so much more opportune than the others, but I always did better if I listened to my heart and my gut than my head. Just the way I am. Luckily, I'm married to someone who uses his head.
Very good. Well, can I
Ollie, you've got the
but that's tough, isn't it? There's no
bit.
winning for me at this point. But let me say thank you for all of those questions.
They were
and
brilliant.
of course to the inimitable Joe Fairley, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I am going to join you there. I am a bit torn. I'll get this over with quickly. I mean, I don't want to judge the answer, you see, because the answers were great, but just on the basis of the questions, I'm drawn towards the Gothic horror question. I am drawn towards it because it elicited such an honest and raw answer, and one we wouldn't always read about in the press release. However, I'm also drawn to the how did you know that it was time to let your child go off into the world or off into the fridge, as we heard said earlier. And I think, because that's just such a big open question, it gets the prize of chocolate. Congratulations at the back. That's right. How did you know? And Joe's answer, we just knew, which I thought was absolutely beautifully put. Thank you very much indeed. Congratulations to you. Come and get your bundle of chocolate, and we hope you're feeling generous. But you can gobble it all up.
There you go. Well done. Thank you.
I'm going to share it with the second best question.
Oh, that's so. How wonderful is that?
What a lovely piece of sharing. But
Thank
actually,
you.
what a brilliant way to finish our couple of days. Thank you so much to Joe for sharing your story, for continuing to share the lessons you've learned, and for also continuing to create amazing businesses. Joe Fairley, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.